Hello, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon sessions of the Lisbon LNEC conference. We are going to start with a new type of session, the Research and Challenge and Strategies, Part 1. And by the way, I'm Anabela Oliveira. I'm a researcher at LNEC. Well, like Helena said in the morning, our goal is to look to enhance the collaborations, bringing the scientific and the technical community around these three very important themes. In this conference, we have three types of sessions. Like you saw in the morning, the keynotes, the roundtable discussions, and now this type of session, which are the presentations of the flagships and the projects and strategies from selected institutions, invited, given the quality and the importance of their research. So it's my biggest privilege to welcome our three guests. We are going to have three presentations, each of them taking about 20 minutes, and then we have some time for questions. Given the constraints of time, please bear in mind that your questions would fit the time that is possible to do. So it's my great pleasure and my great honor to welcome Professor Jan Martinsen, head of the Ocean and Water Unit of the Research GRC, the Joint Research Center from the European Commission. Please, Professor Jan, the floor is yours.
All right. Should I go there?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, me again. It's really great to be with you. And thanks for the lunch to the organizers. That was fantastic. Yesterday, when I arrived, the typical thing happened. Parts of my luggage got lost, quite annoying, when I was flying to this nice city. But I came to my hotel and I found this little brochure here, Museo de Agua, forgive my accent, and then I thought, I'm at the right place here. It's really fantastic that you have a water museum. I will certainly not miss it. Right, I would like to introduce my institution a little bit to you very shortly, talk about water and our attitude to this really rather precious gem. And I would like to put also what we are discussing here into a context, and I think this is quite important, of what I would like to call the triple crisis we are facing. And also what we are trying to do from the point of view of the Joint Research Center as part of the Commission in order to tackle this triple crisis in the context of water governance. I will talk about extreme events and what we are doing about this, and also move then towards a more broader discussion on water resilience. Water, we take it really for too natural in a way, too given, and I could not agree more with Sylvia Earle, the oceanographer, who said, no water, no life, no blue, no green. And this is absolutely the quintessence of why we are being together here, I assume. Now, I pointed this out before. We at the Joint Research Center, we house actually a kind of knowledge center on the circular economy. And part of this is also the consumption footprint. What you see here is actually the consumption footprint on water use. The redder the color on the map, the bigger it is. And I thought I would like to share this with you because actually Portugal seems to be rather outsticking there. So have a look for yourself. I found this very interesting, but generally this is, I just wanted to highlight, because we talked about personal responsibility, that I think the consumption footprint monitoring tool is a nice way to see actually what is our impact generally on the environment with the actions that we pursue, privately, on industrial level, and so on. Obviously, we are facing these days immense challenges, natural disasters arising from climate change. I will come to the triple crisis, but also conflicts and horrible wars and so on and so forth, migration. This is really amazing, and certainly often we feel like this little kid here starting to think, well, how do I cope with this? How do I get up the stairs? And my institution, we would really like to help getting up the stairs. together with citizens, together with policy-making colleagues in Brussels. Fortunately, in the Commission, it is basically, and I think also generally in Europe, to be honest, it is generally accepted that policy also needs to be based on scientific evidence. And this is where we come from. It is not our role to decide anything. It is our role to scientifically inform policy making. It is up to politicians to decide. It is up to us as citizens to decide, certainly not up to us as scientists. We do this by trying to anticipate major developments and challenges by integrating knowledge across borders, be it economy, be it natural sciences, be it social sciences. And of course, obviously, and this is where you can measure us, we would also like to create impact on that. Finally, we are located in 5 countries, member states of the European Union. I myself have the pleasure and privilege to live in the north of Italy in the Lake region and to work there, obviously. The triple crisis. I think it became very, very evident in the so-called Oder disaster that has happened in 2022, actually, that we are looking not only at climate change, we are looking actually at a huge wave of 3 impacts coming together, which is climate change, but it's also pollution and it's also biodiversity decline. And unfortunately, these 3 work perfectly well together to create the perfect storm. In the Oder River between Germany and Poland, this was clearly shown. We actually helped to analyze the situation there. And it is that there was a specific or very strong heat wave leading to the diminishing of water volumes. There was input of salts coming from the industry in the river, favoring the growth of a certain algae species, which, by the way, is an invasive species on top of it, which is another problem. And this led to immense death of fish. And I raise this here because, first of all, as I said, I think this illustrates really nicely the triple crisis we are in, but also this will be coming more often, and we better be prepared. We in the Ocean and Water Unit, together with partner units, actually, which are more concerned with disaster risk management, we really try to build a holistic picture from the source to the seas of what is going on, including human activities, including ecosystem services, and linking more and more oceans to coasts to freshwater systems. Now, about extreme events. This is rather colleagues of us working on this, work a lot on disaster risk management. And clearly, and I already, also based on their advice, I highlighted this, we need to move towards a risk assessment framework where we really can better assess what certain extreme events mean. I mean, you see, clearly we know this also here, and you know this in Portugal from your own experience. There are more and more droughts going on. The pictures to the right-hand side, yes, indeed, show floods in Greece and also in Slovenia. I mean, Slovenia, come on, basically the country was underwater, so it's really quite amazing. Now, to point out, we have the JRC Peseta study. The results of the 4th edition just came out. And really, I mean, have a look for yourself. What we really try to do is to combine different climate scenarios with the impact they create, be it environmentally, but also socioeconomic-wise, and also try to hint to anticipation mechanisms which allow us to hopefully better control certain effects that climate change has. Also, and I alluded to this before, the Copernicus Emergency Management Service, it's really now also, there are major revisions. It covers floods, but also, and this was mentioned here, wildfires. It covers droughts. It provides a picture of what is going on and helps also member state governments and institutions to better prepare for such events or to manage those while they are happening. By the way, this is obviously also publicly accessible, which is quite important. Now, this is one of the flagship products which I would like to highlight. It just came out, the European Drought Risk Atlas, which really illustrates in a very accessible way how different areas, to what extent different areas in the European Union are affected by drought and will be affected by drought. It looks at different parameters and indices such as the evaporation index, which you see here to the left-hand side across Europe, and also variations in drought risks, for example, and evolution of drought risks related to freshwater ecosystems, which you see on the right-hand side. Have a look at yourself. I think it's a very nice product helping us to better understand actually what the situation is and will be in Europe. And then, of course, we have the European Drought Observatory. Again, the idea being that it is accessible to the general public as well as to decision makers and scientists in order to work together to come to a better understanding about droughts, drought risks, and also resilience and adaptation measures. Now, in all that, how can we actually become more water resilient? How can we adapt to an ever-changing situation where water becomes either too scarce or is there in too much abundance, and mainly all the time it tends to be quite dirty, actually, which is another problem. Actually, what I find quite amazing is, if you look at the European Union, the so-called water acquis, that means the legislation that underpins the governance of water, be it freshwater or marine, is quite impressive. I mean, look at this here. I added some legislation and initiatives which are not directly linked to water, but which have quite an impact, such as Copernicus. But then we obviously have the Floods Directive, the Water Reuse Regulation, Drinking Water, Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, Integrated Nutrient Management and Nitrates Directive, which have a lot to do with water, Bathing Water Directive, the Water Framework Directive, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And here actually is already the big first change. The Water Framework Directive is a huge really package which has a big impact on all of us. The Marine Strategy Framework Directive likewise. What we would like to see is that these two move more together and are more harmonized and fused, and particularly for coastal areas. I mention here also the sustainable blue economy because, for example, energy efficiency using offshore energy plays a big role. Desalination, we talked about this we didn't discuss it, but at least we raised it, that plays a big role. And then the common fisheries policy. And this I basically raised because I think it's a very specific and very interesting policy. First of all, it's one of the very few common policies we have, but it is also legally stipulated in there that everything that is happening under its remit must be based on best available scientific advice. So in this case, actually, the European Commission cannot ignore the advice that comes from scientists when they come up, for example, with TAC, so total catch quotas for the December Council. They cannot ignore this, the Commission, my colleagues in Brussels. And also, and maybe we can discuss it at some stage, when it comes to data usage, there's the Data Collection Framework Regulation feeding into the common fisheries policy, again, a regulation, so the member states actually have to collect data which is compiled for scientific advice purposes. And we address all this, putting it in the context of like the Zero Pollution Action Plan, biodiversity strategy, farm to fork, nature protection, climate change, really trying to advance the European Green Deal. One of the products which we use for that product is Blue 2. It's a very holistic, very comprehensive freshwater marine modeling framework where we really try to combine modeling components addressing either freshwater issues or marine and ocean issues and putting those together. And I don't go into details here, just to show you what is important for me is it's a very modular approach, again, by which we try to pick up models and fusing them, bringing them together in order ultimately to help, for example, to support land use and water use with scientific advice or other things. So it's a very interesting approach, which I gladly also discuss with you. When it comes to water policies, actually, there are a lot of activities going on. Very importantly, we cannot do this alone. So we are actually, under the Water Framework Directive, we are involved in EcoStat, expert working groups that look at the ecological status of river systems. But clearly, we do this with scientists from the member states. Otherwise, this simply wouldn't work. We look at the chemical status, again, with member state scientists, nutrient standards, free-flowing rivers, which is a very important topic these days, microbiological parameters, and reuse of water. So this is sort of the breadth of the activities we pursue, and once again, we do not do this alone. Our job is basically to do this together with scientists from the member states and to feed best available scientific advice emerging from this to the European Commission. In this respect, when it comes to scientific output, we have the European Union Knowledge Hub for water. So if you're interested or would like also to contact us or to engage with us, you can have a look what is going on there and maybe also criticize or comment to that. What I think is also quite important is, I think research, yes, of course, science, of course, we need that, but there's such a lot that we can already build on, and it's really time that we move towards solutions, that we identify solutions and implement them across the European Union. One of our approaches in this respect is that we acknowledge that we have to look at water as a precious gem that is actually used by many stakeholders, industry, food production, private households, and so on. So under the water, energy, food, and ecosystem nexus, we bring together water in the context of energy, agriculture, ecosystems, and climate. And we see how these different sectors actually compete for water on one hand. Maybe also, if there are any, we identify synergies and how can basically, using this approach, the governance of water can be improved. There is the Water Energy Nexus in Europe report, for example, to look at this aspect, where we soon will publish a second edition. We try in this approach here to combine actually water usage in the agriculture sector and taking into account parameters like the capacity of the soil to take up water, trying to help minimize water usage in the agriculture sector by modern technologies, but also to see what actually happens to runoff water, for example, and assess really generally water usage in the agriculture sector and how we can contribute to water savings. To do that, we rely very much on the Water Exploitation Index, which basically is a measure of stress on water systems in the European Union. And we create, these maps are also published and publicly available. We create maps for the European Union looking at the different regions and to what extent water scarcity is actually an issue and problem there. You see to the right-hand side, Portugal, for example, it's not yet a huge globally system, but this is to be taken with huge caution, because if you would zoom into this map, you don't see it very well here, water stress and water scarcity is often also a very local, regional problem. Yeah? So these maps have to be taken with care if you really take a look at a certain member country. But you can, in our maps, you can also zoom into regions and the member states. We try to contribute by looking at consumption and extraction of water to really make better use of this precious resource. For example, finding ways for increased irrigation efficiency, reusing of wastewater. As you know, there was just legislation being formed about it, reducing leakage. That was actually not mentioned yet here. And in Europe, the infrastructure sort of guiding water, taking water, distributing water is really in dire waters. Actually, that's silly to say, but it's really a big problem. There is a lot of water leakage going on, and we lose a lot of water through inapt infrastructure. And desalination, of course, also. For the water reuse regulation, I think this is really a very important piece of legislation where water reuse is problematic because the attitude of us is often careful when it comes to reuse of water, for example, for irrigation on food or for food production, so stuff we eat later on. But I think it's really going somewhere, and I think the harmonized standards that are being set together with the member states, that was really, really difficult. It's still actually ongoing, but it's taking a promising road. And our role here was really to try together, again, the scientists of the member states to advise the Commission, advise stakeholders on requirements of water quality, to provide guidelines which are harmonized. We organized workshops, and we also participated in the drafting of the regulation. So, and published, of course, that's very important, also documenting reports on this. Now I want to come very quickly to a topic which I think is worth a discussion, and it's really a very, often a very dispute going on, and that is how can we actually better store our water, and water reservoirs is what I want to come to. And we are thinking about how can we actually use water reservoirs sustainably under the water, energy, food, and ecosystem nexus. And one very interesting idea is floating photovoltaics. So colleagues of mine in the Joint Research Center, they put out a study, or they did a study, which areas of the European Union are particularly prone to use a combined effort to use dams and water reservoirs with photovoltaics as a kind of, in the end, renewable energy-driven way of storing water. And you see this illustrated in this map. And probably you know about this, so you will find this boring, but I was really delighted to see that actually I found that the world's first combined floating solar and hydroelectric plant was installed in Alto Rapagão reservoir in Portugal in 2017. And it has quite an amazing output also. So this is really impressive. So maybe you were even involved in the constructing of it, I don't know. I found this very, very impressive. Okay, and generally what we also, I said this at the beginning, we want to include and introduce more and more also social and economic aspects into our analysis. So we did this under the, in the context of agricultural irrigation, but also, and that's I just alluded to, the use of hydroeconomic, desalination, I said this before, and other things. And also what we try to move into, but it's really tricky, is water pricing, which is worth a discussion in itself. To wrap all this up, so we believe that when it comes to water management and governance, major challenges arise from this triple crisis I was alluding to beforehand. We think that the diagnosis of many problems is actually quite clear, and we even have therapies proposed or solutions. They must be science and evidence-based, and mostly they must be implemented. So we must now come to a stage where we make things happen. We think being part of the European Commission, there's two sides to it. One is really top-down and on EU level by adopting common goals in the European Union, which are then legally enshrined. But also, and very importantly, and we have discussed this repeatedly, also individual and local commitment, engagement, buy-in has to be created. If you are not convinced, it won't work. So this is something we all need to work together towards. We will continue to actually accompany the analysis of water quality and quantity at EU scale, and also look at the climate and socioeconomic impacts. We would really like to drive this idea of the water, energy, food and ecosystem nexus forward. We provide technical and scientific advice. And also, when it comes to dissemination, we try to get better and better, because we can do so much science. Just scientific publishing doesn't really help. We need to get better in disseminating what we're doing. And part of it, this is why I'm here, and thank you for inviting me. We also would like to support EU more and more in strategic foresight and thinking, meaning that we try to get better to grips with looking into the future. And obviously, again, without our cooperation with member states, which on so many levels we do, particularly also the scientific, this all won't work. So I hope that I raised some interest in our work, and take this literally, keep in touch if you think this was interesting. We are really interested to work together with you, to listen to you and your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jan. We have time for one or two quick questions. 3 questions, okay. I'm going to select. Professor Rodrigo Oliveira, please.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Hello? Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm referring now to water scarcity. And I mean, you mentioned the different approaches to deal with water scarcity. Some of them are quite accepted by all the society, namely, obviously, efficiency and reduction of leakage, wastewater reutilization, and desalination. But then, at a certain point, at least in the south of Europe, we have to control water demand. And that's not easy, because obviously water is used for many purposes and it provides you lots of benefits. And my question is, how do you see economic instruments being used to control water demand? Control not in the sense of of avoiding water demand, in the sense of making sure that water is allocated to the purposes that provide the most benefits, and that water-related investments are sound. So we are investing money in infrastructures that somehow are reasonable in the point of view of economic and sustainability. So how do you see the role of economic instruments in that area?
This is an excellent question. I have to be very careful here because I easily go on ice. I mean, don't forget, I have to speak purely scientific here because I'm not, like my colleagues in Brussels, the one that really forms and formulates policies. Having said this, I think one important, I mentioned this here, one important component that we need to discuss is water pricing. I think that is will be a hurtful discussion. It has a lot to do with fairness and justice, actually, also. I think probably, and maybe this will be done under the remit of the Common Agriculture Policy, one has to think about direct, indirect subsidies when it comes to water usage. Maybe there are some incentives which you could create in order to save more water. Also, what we really try to do is, you saw what happened to the nature restoration law, actually, in the, yeah, it has, I steal your microphone, maybe that, thanks. That works better. The nature restoration law, which utterly failed in the parliament, I think one of the reasons was that for many people it's not so clear exactly what you said. You know, we have to invest a lot of money, and the question that comes next is, what do we get out of it? So I think, and it sounds a bit profane, it's very difficult. We need to get better in cost-benefit analysis. And when I say that it's not only cost and benefit in terms of monetary values, but also cultural, social, I addressed fairness and justice. I think these are very important. And it will be very complicated to weave all this together in a sensible analysis. If you have a good idea...
Elena, please.
Yeah, so two questions of two very different natures and for aspects that were not at least directly addressed in your presentation. One has to do with the topics. I have a little bit the perception that when we look at the European policies, and now I ask at the activities carried out by JRC, I have a little bit the perception that there is a focus on the sea and marine, the waters and the economy and the biology and whatever related to the ocean itself. And then you look at the inland waters. And I have the perception that maybe the border is not so much covered by research and by the research programs from the European Union, and even by the development of many research organizations. So I'd like to know whether you have the same feeling or no, or if I'm completely mistaken. I listen a lot about blue economy and then a lot of inland water and kind of no one's land. Of course, I'm exaggerating in terms of saying no one's land, but it seems to be a kind of not so much of attention to the coastal areas themselves. This is one question. The other question is completely different, has more curiosity and ignorance from my side about the way GRC works in terms of developing new knowledge. Here at LNEC, we are a problem-driven research organization. So we do advanced consultancy. We have a very close relationship with the practice, with the field, so we do a lot of work with sorting out problems. And this inspires us to develop then new knowledge and to do research. So we cover from the fundamental to the rollout, everything. For us, this is fundamental for us. It's really the way we survive as researchers. So I think it's a bit different in your case. So I'd like to know, how do you know what are the true problems? How do you interact? How do you connect with the outside society?
Oh yeah, I love this question because it points out to some challenges we also have. Answering to your first question, I share your feeling. I said this, I alluded to this here. We have the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and we have the Water Framework Directive. And Both of them are very holistic approaches to try to get to grips with water governance on one hand, freshwater, and coastal and oceans on the other hand. But there's a gray area sort of where the two directives overlap, and yet they are kind of dissonant. And we really would like to try to harmonize that. And I agree with you also that there is actually a neglect, I believe, in particularly the coastal region. We need to become better. We try to do this. To give you one example, in our modeling approaches, we try to see what is happening if we reach our zero pollution action plan goals for microplastic in freshwater systems, for example. We try to model what would this mean actually for coastal areas and the sea as a whole. And the findings are very interesting because the effect is of course retarded, but more than that, due to ocean currents and climate change also, there are really peculiar concentrations of microplastic in certain areas in the sea and coastal regions. So we really try to do this, to link the freshwater systems to the marine part, and there's still a long way to go, and particularly also on policy level. It would be great if you could harmonize that more. Your second question, actually, I think they have a lot in common, but there are also differences. So obviously, the Joint Research Center, it is our task really to inform policy making and implementation. So it's not so much inform stakeholders in building something, for example, but it's very objective driven also. We are not an academic institution. We work together with academic institutions, but we are not. Yeah? So our colleagues in Brussels, or partly also the European Parliament, asked us to address certain challenges of objectives of policy. Can certain policies reach their objectives? Under which conditions when it comes to environment? That is what we do, and we advise them with that. And you asked me sort of, well, how do we kind of organize ourselves and with whom and how do we interact? We depend a lot on working together with engineers, with scientists, with academic institutions. Unfortunately, under the remit of the current Horizon Europe, it is a bit difficult to interact directly with the consortia. We are trying to think how this can be better, but I grew up with this. I was involved in FP5 and in Horizon Europe 20, I think was called, in several projects, and it was so enriching and so valuable. And my colleagues say the same, and I hope we will also get back to that. But we are anyway open really to interact with anyone who's interested, and we try also to reach out from our side. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. You referred in the beginning, and the mayor said the same, we need to give information to decision makers. I fully agree, but I think it's not enough. What I think is that you need to give information, but more than that, you need to influence in some way political decisions, maybe convince. What I mean by that, you work, let's say, 10 years in a fantastic project with your team, and you get 2 or 3 or 4 fantastic conclusions. And please do not be happy with that and publish a few articles. You need, if you spend 10 years there, you must be prepared to spend 10 weeks thinking about how can this country or this world or this region implement that at institutional point of view, at legal point of view, and you are not a lawyer, at economic, financial point of view, and social point of view. And if you spend 10 years working in project and 10 hours on that, maybe you can spend 10 minutes with minister and Diego in 10 minutes to give him that information and to convince him he needs to do something in policy and what are the different instruments, legal, institutional, he needs to change to have success on that. So for me, it's not only information, is a little bit more than that. And I believe our organizations, this organization here, when I worked so many years, and many others, are not yet prepared to transform 10 years of work in 10 minutes of a good talk with minister. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was more a comment and advice, which I gladly take up. I think I think we need to be a little bit careful with influencing, because as scientists, I think we do not have any privilege when any other citizens in order to take decisions which concern us as a society. And this is particularly true also in our case. We need to be neutral. So already our partner DGs in the Director Generals in Brussels, they come to us and say, well, Jan, actually, can you tell me, we have like the Zero Pollution Action Plan, we have the targets until 2013-50. Will we reach those with the current developments? It's not our job then to say to the policymaker what he or she has to do. It's just to provide the information. Well, no, actually, no, we won't reach it. Now, we can, of course, and this is where I gladly take up your advice, and you're right, and probably we have to become better in the communication. We have to be really clear in explaining why don't we reach it, and perhaps also hint to certain solutions coming from science, but also engineering, obviously. But it's really also tricky, because, again, I think as soon as scientists are perceived as the know-it-alls, who provide really try to influence, that is it gets tricky in a way, the whole discussion. But I generally also agree, and this includes all of us, we have to be better in communicating. And this is so difficult, because we love data, we love details, we love to deal with contradictions, and of course any person who's not a scientist might not share this love, and this is getting difficult. Thank you for your advice.
Thank you so much, Professor Jan Martinson.
You upgrade me. I'm not a professor.
No, doctor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would love to have more questions, but we are getting short of time. So I'm going to invite our next speaker and the representation of the Algarve University, Professor Carla Rolo Antunes, the coordinator of the Heritage, Landscape and Construction Center.
Good afternoon. The University of Algarve congratulates the organization of this event, Engenheira Helena Alegre, and thanks for the invitation to participate of my university. I congratulate my colleagues of this panel and everyone who is present here. The University of Algarve team is made up of several members, researchers and teachers. The names is here and listed here, and some of them you know. We would like to share University of Algarve research strategies regarding floods, water scarcity, and extreme events, and we will present our projects, or some of our projects in these areas. Main changes and strategies must be based, we think, in partnerships and cooperation for water. Is essential to accelerating progress towards to obtain the Sustainable Development Goals. Building cooperation across all dimensions of sustainable development are very important. We think cooperations, like we do now, improves water governance and decision making, stimulates innovation solutions and more efficiency. We think the integrated approach are essential, and the interdisciplinary perspective is our aim. We think it is essential to prepare and adapt the territory to build resilience to respond to crisis situations, which tend to be increasingly frequently and intensive. Last week, we have some problems of drought in Algarve and in the south of Portugal, and today we have problems of floods. We have droughts and floods. One day we are with floods, and in another day we have some other extreme events. So we have to anticipate and we have to plan, and we think that collection and cooperation to have robust models that can support risk and decision, and the support decision is essential. WALG aims to respond to the current societal challenges of sustainable water management, always in mind the issues associated with global change, climate and anthropogenic, in different scales, locally in Algarve, national, Portugal and internationality. In this sense, the research in Algarve is based on some main pillars: urban resilience to climate change. Another group works in early warning systems for coastal risk assessment. Water use for non-potable purpose, it's another aim of our research team. And finally, we have partners with some groups like LNEC, with managed aquifer recharge as a solution, or probably is a solution. It's a question to water drought and the problems related with this problem. We have a master in this time with water urban cycle, and we try to have urban cities with resilience, and we have aim to increase the city's resilience to climate extremes. And what to do? We think the Nature service is basically to these problems. We integrated analysis of solutions to buffer peak flood flows and improve flow capacity in critical locations in some urban areas like Lolé and Quarteira. And now we developed a new program with technology and innovation in urban green space. We developed a new project, Green Space Smart, with irrigation control. And we have to think the water is fundamental for us, but is in the center of the circularity. And we think it's very important for us to make this idea to our pollutions. We try in Lolé and Quarteira the quantification of Nature service in these cities, and with Nature service we make runoff reduction, water retention, carbon sequestration, carbon storage, oxygen production, air pollution removal. So you have to do some measures, and we quantify this service in cities with Nature-based solutions. We have a project in Colata Island where you use alternative water sources for non-potable uses, and we have a solar desalination and rainwater harvesting. In the early warning systems for coastal risk assessment, we think are a preparedness measure, and these anticipate expected risks to minimize or avoid disaster. We have a project which partner is LNEC and others, and this early warning system for coastal risks induced by storms developed, test and apply prototypes to alert about potential consequence of overwash or overtopping and erosion induced by storms. We have some 4 prototypes to Caparica, is near Lisbon, Quarteira in 2 places, and Praia de Faro in Algarve. This project is implementation at Hidroalerta with LNEC, and these want alerts up to 3 days before the occurrence. Here we can see some outputs of Caparica overtopping for pedestrians, fittings, vehicles and buildings, and to Quarteira and Faro overtopping and erosion structures. Here we can see some examples of this application and some alerts for 3 days what happened with the people, fightings, buildings and vehicles. This is illustration of an alert created by the coastal component of Hidroalerta for Praia de Faro in Algarve for a large swell event. In Algarve we have many golf courses irrigation. Golf courses irrigation needs too much water, and now you develop some systems to use water use for golf courses irrigation. We have some projects with 4 golf courses. Some of them irrigation these courses with this type of water, and we think this is a main and an objective of us to install in Algarve. Finally, we like to talk with you about the managed aquifer recharge as a solution to water scarcity and drought. We know the rising water demand, increasing stress on groundwater as a resource, but we consider the MAR, Managed Aquifer Recharge, which is considered as one of the promising groundwater engineering approach to water security, especially in drought-occurring areas. Storing water in times to access to combat scarcity in periods of drought, while improving water quality and combating and mitigation-related phenomena such as saline intrusion into aquifers is one main of this project. This project, MARSOL, is again with many partners. One of them are the LNEC, and we had 8 field sites in the south of Europe with the climates near the Portugal Mediterranean areas, and we have to do some field experiments, and we try to demonstrate that this managed aquifer research is a sound, safe and sustainable strategy that can be applied with great confidence. With this project, MARSOL aims to stimulate the use of reclaimed water and other alternative water sources, and to optimize storage of excess water to be recovered in times of storage by influencing gradients. Here we can see some demonstration in Rio Seco. It's a river in Campina de Faro, and we demonstrate in this carried out into infiltration bases. We think there is no single solution to the problems of floods and droughts. In terms of floods and extreme events, the strategy must involve a combination, a sum of interventions that complete each other. And we think in desalination, and we can discuss this problem here, if is one solution to the drought in Portugal based on salt water. Finally, thank you very much for your attention, and is necessary to adapt to the climate change. It is essential to make some strategies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carla. I'll open now the floor for 1 or 2 quick questions. Well, if there are no questions...
Can I?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, this is getting difficult. I look at the audience here, sorry. The aquifer recharge, actually, that sounds absolutely interesting. So could you just tell me what is your first impression? I mean, is this really a manageable and promising contribution to better governance of our water resources?
First, we think no, but now I think it's a good idea to... In the beginning, I think it's not a good idea, but now I agree it's probably one of the solutions for the problem of south of Portugal.
Thank you.
I'll just give briefly the floor to João Paulo Ferreira to maybe make a last comment before we move to the next session.
Well, thank you for the question. I was in that picture, so probably I can say you something. We have already expended like 1 million euros in practicing 3 different projects here with Israel, with a lot of countries, and we managed to see, and we're going to say to the other parts of the world, for instance in Bratislava, invited by Malta, to the European 28 at the time partners, how good this possibility is. We have research in Algarve. For instance, we have assessed the figure that in the wet period of 2000-2001 in Algarve, after filling the dams, their Funch, Chuarada, etc., about 50 cubic hectometers of water were going to the sea. Of course, you need some kind of water to go to the sea, eco water. But a couple of years later, 2004, 2005, we have a drought because I'm a Mediterranean type of climate country, and it was over pumping in the Crença Silvas Algarve, where some of these pictures are, about 50 cubic hectometers. So we had a surplus of 51 in 2000, 2001, and we have a deficit. The problem is that the water was available, the filling in the dams, and you are able to fill in those aquifers. The travel time is of course a problem, and we have done this type of investment to see where is this water going to and how long it stays there. And the problem now related to the question just before is that the research that it was done here and goes worldwide. I was teaching this in Brazil, in China, West. It's very difficult here, sometimes because of the restrictions of what's happening from Brussels, misunderstood in several countries, and I think our country is the same. Last 28th of December, our parliament asked the government, please do implement managed aquifer recharge here, and also another resolution, also the reuse of water, so trying to be separated. So it's very crucial that what is afraid in the decision makers, like Jaime Baptiste was saying before, can be addressed by the laboratories of state like this one or other ones, saying it's safe. The others are applying. In Spain, our nearby country, 160 pages for groundwater recharge was being distributed, so do that, because storage, that was, I think, missing in your fantastic presentation, but storage, somebody said in the United States a couple of years ago, the solution is storage dummy. Let's do that, because you probably can have the same amount of water in average, but you're going to have concentration of water in floods, and we have not really understood that floods are a solution for droughts. And this is what probably Joint Research Center, I was in ISPRA also presenting things, can help us doing. Research into innovation, go on the field and apply it. And we have to do that. We have ongoing projects. Teresa Leitão is doing this, Agrimar, I think, trying to show that it's usable. But we have political, administrative barriers toward this, and we have to overcome this.
Thanks. I mean, this was great. But just to say, I completely agree, and I thought actually I highlighted the storage. Water storage is indeed, I mean, a huge topic which will help us ultimately also for water resilience. Thank you. I'm looking forward to further discuss with you afterwards, and you too, of course.
Thank you. So let's move to the next presentation. I welcome and have the pleasure to introduce Professor Ricardo Trigo from the Climate Change Group at the Faculty of Sciences of the University of Lisbon.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And my background is quite different from most of the people here, so I'm a climatologist, and I hope that my view provides a different angle. But still, Faculty of Science works a lot in water-related issues. So, although I don't have the pretension to show all of them, I think it's important to highlight, together with colleagues from different departments, some of the issues that are relevant within the scope of climate change and the extremes that are affecting us more and more. And the three first topics, and I'm just going to show a brief slide for each of these, cover aquifer contamination by extreme coastal floods, morphological thresholds associated with storms also, advancement of remote sensing technologies within the scope of the new machine learning availability and lots of new data. And these topics are mostly covered by colleagues from the geology department and the coastal erosion environment group. As I said, I'm a climatologist and I'm working on quite a different number of issues together with several people at the Faculty of Science. And two of them, I think, are quite relevant within the scope of this conference. So I'm talking a little bit about increasing frequency of droughts and calling your attention to the difference of droughts that are just triggered by lack of precipitation and those that are triggered by increasing levels of evapotranspiration, which is becoming more and more important, not only in Iberia, in the Mediterranean environment, but throughout the world. I can mention quite a few examples. And the other is something that we've been working in the last 10 years, and that is the role of atmospheric rivers in extreme events in Iberia and several other places. And these have been developed by our climatology group at the geophysics department at the Faculty of Science. And starting by those first three that I mentioned, so our colleagues are really concerned, and this links well with the previous talks, with aquifer contamination by extreme coastal floods. And this is particularly relevant within the context of climate change because we are aware that average sea level is really rising, and it will rise more, probably at a faster rate due to melting of parts of Greenland and parts of Antarctic. So the rate of sea level rise is increasing in the last few decades when we have good satellite data to confirm that. And together with the strong likelihood of stronger storms also associated with a warmer climate, not only extratropical storms like the one we're suffering today, but also tropical storms, and our group is looking at tropical storms, and they are increasing between Azores, Iberia, and the UK. The strong tropical storms, not the total number, but the most intense ones. And therefore, when you put those two mechanisms, increasing sea level rise together with more storms, you have the increasing likelihood of coastal flood and obviously salt water intrusion in some of the coastal aquifers. That's the danger, and our colleagues, together with people from LNEC and other universities such as Algarve, are increasingly worried and want to monitor that situation better, which is the example shown here with the aquifer on the other side of Caparica. On a similar tone, the colleagues from geology are also worried with the possibility that the standard conceptual model for coastal erosions in our beach might not be sustainable when we have very intense storms. That is, the typical profile is reliable when we have moderate and strong storms, and therefore the profile doesn't change that much. But when we're talking about extreme storms, then a threshold might be surpassed, and therefore, as you can see in the time series on the right, if we have storms, then the beach volume still stays in this range. It goes down when the storm is strong, but only when the storm passes a threshold, then we might see a collapse and an entirely new profile as shown here, and that will recover depending on the availability of material close by, which is followed by the red curve, or far away, and that would be the blue curve as an example. And therefore, they are quite interested to follow this type of mechanism. And again, the third topic mentioned by our colleagues is related with the exponential increase in availability of data, particularly high-resolution satellite and unmanned aerial vehicle data, together with many videos also, that if we allow new artificial intelligence techniques, particularly machine learning, we can increase the accuracy of the satellite-derived shoreline observations across different methods and coastal environments. In fact, we've collaborated in a few examples before, and therefore, according to them, these three topics are particularly relevant in terms of challenge in the coming decade, and they want to pay particular attention. But as I said, I'm particularly biased to climatology and climate change studies, and therefore I would like to look carefully into these two specific situations, which is those related with droughts. Here I'm showing a major drought that took place during the hydrological year 2011-2012, and this was just a few years after the most dramatic drought we had in 2004-2005. So with data for 100 years and covering the entire Iberian Peninsula, we were able to show a few years ago that the three most intense droughts for the entire Iberian Peninsula took place precisely in the previous 15 years. And if I had data for the last 10 years, you could see 2016-17 here and probably 2021-22. This is just related with precipitation. So, in fact, Iberia is one of the few places where precipitation is decreasing in a way that is statistically significant. People tend to talk about the entire Mediterranean, but that's not true. We're doing a complete survey with thousands and thousands of stations that go really back at the beginning of the 20th century and quite a few into the middle of the 19th century, and there's huge decadal and interannual variability. So Iberia is really one of the major spots where precipitation is declining in a way that is statistically significant. Still, droughts are not only driven by precipitation, and therefore, when we use, and this is, by the way, trends of a drought index only based in precipitation, so this is standardized precipitation index, and we can see for the entire Iberia values that are negative, so it's increasing since the 60s. But if we use an index that was already mentioned by Jan just minutes ago, the SPEI, and that is standardized precipitation and evapotranspiration index, that is an index that also incorporates the effect of temperature. And within a world that is getting warmer, it doesn't make sense to use indices that do not take into account warmer temperature and what is associated with that. And you can see that the trends are stronger than what we see on the left. In fact, when we compute the difference is quite significant for most of Iberia. And what I'm showing here is the same almost all over the world. So when you use indices that incorporate the effect of temperature, because temperature is growing all over the world, although in some places at a higher rate than in others, this difference between these two indices are quite important. In fact, if we use the old Palmer Drought Index that is still used by our Met Office, IPMA, you will see something quite fantastic for the last 100 years. The only drought events that occupied the two most intense classes, that is extreme drought and very strong droughts, given by these brownish colors, all of them occurred in the last 20 years. That is a strong drought like 99 is shown in several colors, but when we go to 2005, 2012, 2017, the year of the famous fires, and then 2022, all of them took place in the last 20 years. And this is driven partly by the lack of water and part by the increment in evapotranspiration, okay? We are working a lot with people in Brazil, people in South Africa, people in Australia, and in many different biomes, the same is happening. So when we incorporate the temperature, we see that drought indices are becoming drier, and this is a huge, really huge problem. Among other things, because this type of situation fuels the likelihood of heat waves. So heat waves really are much more frequent within the scope of this type of strong droughts, lack of water in the soil. And for biomes like the Mediterranean type of climate, you see many more fires occurring during these drought heat wave compound events, okay? And this is happening not only in Iberia, Mediterranean, is occurring in Western USA, Chile, Southern Brazil, Southern Africa, and Australia. Now, the second topic I would like to show you, because it's really important, although today it's not a typical day for an atmospheric river, but I think it's quite new for some of the people here in the audience. It's to call your attention for atmospheric rivers. So atmospheric rivers only became an issue in California 25 years ago, in Europe about 10, 12 years ago. And why? Because we need good satellite data to understand them. They have been there always, but only with satellite data. Atmospheric rivers is basically a fancy name for these huge plumes of water that are coming from the tropical moisture source and that travel usually associated with an extratropical cyclone. You can see one here, another there, and they occur quite often in the main ocean basins of the world. They are associated, and I hope to show you a couple of examples, with some of the most intense floods that we had at very different settings and time frames. An example is shown here. So this is the Madeira flash floods 13 years ago, where we had the collapse of the Funchal city, 45 known fatalities, and record precipitation throughout Madeira Island, including levels of 350 millimeters in the mountains, and that was record for entire Portugal and for the islands, of course, where we have more than 150 years of daily data. So that's quite a large thing. And if I can put here this running, you can see the atmospheric river. So the arrows are showing where the wind is strong. In order to have an atmospheric river, it's not just a matter of high quantity of water that we call integrated water throughout the column. We need strong winds associated with that transport of moisture. So you see the winds and you see the transport from tropical and passing there over Madeira. And that was the main reason that for 12 hours they had continuous rain coming from the southern, you can see that it's coming from the south. And this is becoming more frequent nowadays. I'm just going to show you another example in June where all the records were broken. But in fact, nowadays we have access to a huge amount of good quality data that allows to look back into former records, such as the famous river flow floods of River Douro more than 100 years ago. So the most important floods in Douro before the construction of the dams took place in December 1909, when the lower bridge of Dom Luís was almost collapsed. You can see some nice photos from the time. And when we start to look into what happened in northern Portugal, we realized that we could see a lot of floods and landslides, not only in the national Douro, but in the international one. So these are places where local floods took place. You can see that almost 4,000 people were affected, and in fact 89 died, 57 in floods, 32 in landslides. But you can see that a lot of floods also took place around Lisbon and Lower Tagus. So how come a flood affecting here was also affecting Tagus, and that's not an obvious thing. Again, because we are now able to have 3D reconstruction of what happened until the mid-19th century, I'm going to show you. So this took place around 2021 of December. Look at this plume, an atmospheric river striking Iberia precisely in a direction that crosses Lisbon, okay? So the floods were more important in northern Iberia, affecting all the Douro River basin, but you can see perfectly that it's going to cross Lisbon exactly here, okay? So this type of situation is really, really, really key to explain some of the floods. I'm showing this one, but the most important floods of River Tagus and Guadiana took place in the 5th and 6th of December, 1876, okay? More than 150 years ago, and I can talk 1 hour just about that. And it's a river, atmospheric river as well. So they are really important, and they are, you must take into account when we talk about precipitation, and particularly extreme precipitation. And this graphic shows the contribution of atmospheric rivers to the precipitation on a monthly scale towards Western Iberia, towards Western Europe. You can see that in some months they account for up to 30% of the rain. Of course, when you go to Italy or to Poland, they are not relevant because their relevance really disappears as we go inland. But if you look into the top 10 situation in terms of floods, that's what you can see here in color. So think about the top 10 precipitation events ever in all of these grid points. Everything in yellow means that the top 5 were associated directly with an atmospheric river, okay? And you can see that northern Portugal, Spain, France, and even Norway, all of these, the extreme precipitation events, part of them, sometimes half, 60%, were clearly associated with this type of extreme events. So you might ask, what about the future? What are we expecting in terms of climate change? Well, it's been done, and the news are not so good. So what you can see here is era. So this is observations. These are models. The black historical means historical period, and then RCP 4.5, RCP 8.5. I think all of you know what this means. This is moderate climate change scenario. This is a strong climate change scenario. I'm just showing what is going to happen over Iberia. Each one here represents a different model, and this one at the left represents the ensemble of all the models, okay? So the black is trying to reproduce the green. That's the purpose. And here are climate change scenarios in terms of number of atmospheric rivers in the future, okay? And the future is happening now. We are having more and more atmospheric rivers striking Southern Europe and California. Just to give you an example, California last winter, they had a record of precipitation associated with the atmospheric rivers. And if you remember, December 22, Portugal suffered 4 or 5, and Lisbon record for more than 170 years was broken precisely during 12 and 13 of December, associated with a very strong atmospheric river, okay? So this is happening, and I want to finalize showing the new record precipitation event in Madeira. And we're talking about really something out of the ordinary for Portugal. So we're talking about 6th of June, 2023, 5 millimeters in 24 hours, if you consider 24 hours as usual, because they registered 610 millimeters from mid-afternoon to mid-afternoon on the following year. But I'm trying to keep the same time to keep comparisons possible. So you can see we have some automatic algorithms, and you can see here when the dots are there, it means that atmospheric river is observed. And this is by far much more than anything observed in the last 160 years, both in continental Portugal or Madeira. Therefore, you must realize that in the last year alone, the new record for Lisbon in 24 hours and the new absolute record of precipitation in the entire Portugal were both associated with 2 atmospheric rivers. Okay, that's the message. Why? Well, because the systems are becoming more frequent and because the fuel that provides the moisture is getting warmer and warmer. As you can see here, the water in the ocean is getting warmer and warmer, and we've never seen anything resemble to the sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic that you can see here. These sea surface temperature anomalies are exactly for the 6th of June of this year. And this is just astronomical. For sea to be 3 degrees above the average is just, from a different world. The typical anomaly would be half a degree, 1 degree, 1.5, 3 degrees for several months imply this type of situation. Instead of 200 or 300 millimeters in a moderate atmospheric river, you might have 500 millimeters because there's much more evaporation associated. So my takeaway message, particularly for this last part, are that a significant fraction of Western Europe's precipitation is due to the impact of just a few atmospheric rivers per year, mostly with that west-east orientation. The impact is particularly relevant for top-ranked precipitation days in all Western Europe countries. Most major historical floods events, such as the historical maximum of Douro and Tagus several decades before, were clearly associated with an atmospheric river. And when we look into climate change scenarios, they point towards an increase in atmospheric rivers frequency at all latitudes, including Iberian Peninsula and France. The increment of atmospheric rivers doesn't imply automatically that it rains more. You need another mechanism to imply that all that water will fall, okay? But the fact that we have more atmospheric rivers, the water is warmer, and there's clearly more water flowing towards Iberia. Typically, these results, together with the previous ones related with drought, means that we have a decline in precipitation, but an increment in extreme days with extreme precipitation for a few hours or an entire day. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Ricardo Trigo, for a very interesting presentation. I'll now open the floor to the audience for questions. Jean Paul.
Thank you for the excellent and super interesting presentation. I've worked a bit with climate projections. I looked at them. I see that they agree on temperature increase. Then when we look at precipitation, on average terms, they show a lot of variability. And my question is, were these models made to predict atmospheric rivers?
No.
And more generally, how confident can we be using them to infer what future extreme events will look like?
Yeah, that's a quite good question. So models are very good doing some stuff, but they can be very poor doing some other stuff. For example, the main mode of variability, that is the El Niño for Western Europe, is called North Atlantic Oscillation. And models are extremely good reproducing that. But when you look into situations like today, which take place at a smaller time scale, and we call blocking, if you look at the charts today, you will see an omega profile where the jet stream is coming through Iberia, going all the way to Scandinavia, and then going back. That usually stays there for 1 week, up to 2 weeks, and models are not good reproducing that. And to a certain extent, atmospheric rivers are related with some of these patterns. If they are related with NAO, they're better reproduced when it's a kind of blocking pattern. Blocking patterns will stay there for several days. Models are good to reproduce after the onset of the blocking, but they are not good both in meteorological forecast mode as well as in climate forecast mode, which is quite a different issue. They are not very good with blocking. So to summarize, we can trust up to a certain level, and I've shown you that they tend to reproduce the number of atmospheric rivers. If that difference between historical period and observations was too large, we would not trust. But they are sufficiently good when we compare a number of models. Still, there's lots of problems always.
Well, it's just like following this idea, and I liked very much your presentation too. I was just wondering two different aspects that are part of this. We are having, starting last November, October, C2 Impress project, Horizon Europe project that LNEC is a partner, also with the professor associated to us, Rui Perdigão. And the modeling is totally different from the normal model. It's a system of systems model where we incorporate a lot more information, just precipitation, etc. So totally different type of modeling. But what I'm wondering here, that it was not mentioned today, is the irreversible changes of things affecting the meteorological world. And that's the melting of the Arctic ice cap. And in a couple of years, probably 2030, it's going to be ice-free cap. And when that happens is when the size of the ice there is smaller than Angola, 1 million square kilometers. And that is affecting the United States, where I've been last year also looking to this. That was snowing, all the type of precipitation from Florida to California. So even in Texas, it was glacial type of things. Because the jet stream seems like you told just with your finger right now is changing. So that corona that we have in our saints.
You're giving the answer to your question.
And what is that? Is that the persistence that stays a lot of time without raining and a lot of energy. And the energy that was saying today, 1 degree up is 7% more in humidity. And to put this water back on the earth or the ocean, it requires a huge amount of energy that creates the large hurricanes, well, all this type of things. How is this affecting for a long period? So the melting of the glacial and the precipitation pattern.
That's 10 hours of my master course, so I
You
try
have
to
the time.
summarize
You
in
have
2
the time.
minutes. So first, end of summer ice in the Arctic is disappearing fast. No role there in terms of sea level rise. As you know, it's floating, so it can disappear, and sea level remains the same. It's totally different with Greenland. Any meter disappearing in Greenland contributes significantly. The main point is that we have a differentiated warming rate between tropical, mid-latitudes, and Arctic, particularly Arctic, but Antarctic appears to be following suit. So this means what? We have until now 1.2 degrees of global warming, but probably over the oceans it's smaller than that because of the capacity of the ocean to hold all the energy. And you might have 1 degree in the tropics, and in certain areas in the Arctic, and that has been computed and published in Nature last year, you have areas where we have 5, 6 degrees already of warming. Depends on the area. So can you imagine that the typical temperature gradient between tropics and the Arctic, the temperature is rising here, but it's rising much more in the Arctic. Therefore, the gradient is becoming smaller, and the strength of the jet stream is directly related with the strength of the meridional gradient temperature, okay? So this means that the jet stream is becoming weaker and is meandering more up and down. And when it meanders more up and down, it's related with Rossby waves, very well-known phenomena, that allow to stay like the blocking I was mentioning. And these facilitates extreme events. Cold weather over the United States in the winter going all the way to Texas and Florida. and warm going up during other parts of the year, for example, summer, where they had intense floods in New Hampshire and Vermont that are not so usual. And this type of phenomena is happening at the same time as we have a global warming. So it's not impossible to have global warming very intense in the northern hemisphere and still some latitudes in both the United States and Siberia to have coolness associated with this. At the same time, all that melting water is going to the ocean and is hampering the capacity of the global currents, namely the Gulf current, to go north and to go down. And that has huge consequences as well. So it's a huge problem associated with that differentiated warming rates that you mentioned.
Helena, for the last question? No? No. Okay, so I have a very quick, Lorenzo, please.
Hello, my name is Lorenzo Mendes. I'm from LNEC. Maybe it's not, the question is quick, but the answer maybe not. So it's up to you to decide to answer or not. You said that the models don't solve everything, but my question is, what's the problem after all? Because in my cell phone today, I have an app that says the weather and said it wouldn't rain at Lisbon. It's Chinese, it's from the Chinese manufacturer. But then Google was quite accurate about the time and the amount of rain. So the thing, for me, it was okay when I woke up to know that it would rain. So the question is, it's about the risk or the probability, because it doesn't matter if it will rain a lot today or tomorrow. The thing, are we prepared? So it's not about the exact day or moment that it will rain. It's about if we are prepared or not. So my question about the models is it a problem of availability to also, I mean, the computational power, that it's not available to everyone? Or it's a matter of taking the results of the models and having a risk analysis assessment and accept that it might happen? So
I'm not entirely sure I understood your question. Yes. What I can say is that 2 days ago, the forecast for today was spot on. The European Center for Weather Forecast, which is by far the best modeling center in the world. Just to give you an idea, the second one is the UK Met Office, and the third, the German, so the Americans are fourth. And this was forecast incredibly well, so everyone has access nowadays freely at the web. And there's a bunch of companies in Europe and elsewhere that took those information. If you plot in Google windy and those models, you can see all the information and very beautiful plots where you can see forecasts for the coming days. Basically, they are using forecasts from the European Center and putting nicer plots on the top of it. So all that information is used freely available, and many companies in Europe are based on the quality of that data and provide forecasts for specific areas from sport to agriculture to whatever, and that is available. So you just need to use them. 2 days, to give you an example, 2 days ago, by WhatsApp, I told my friends and my family, be careful on Thursday, and this was really before the civil protection, and I also told the companies that we work to at the Faculty of Science, be careful, Thursday, it's a very dangerous day in terms of wind and precipitation. I'm talking about groups like EDP and Navigator, and they said, okay, thank you very much for the information, we'll be in touch with you if anything happens. So information is there, people can use, but of course you need someone to translate this overflow of information, because if you go to the European Center, you will see, tons and tons of fields and forecasts, and you might be overwhelmed by the amount of data. But fortunately, all these companies, and some of them are available at the websites, somehow help to translate that into useful information. So I'm not sure I follow, but I think.
Thank you so much. Well, we are going to close the session. Please join me in thanking all the speakers for coming here and giving this wonderful presentation. Thank you.